Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host today, Ronnie Moore, like usual. My co-host, like always, Kyle, Jessie, and Kyle. Time for the fourth stop of the Bassmaster Elite Series at Lake Hartwell. We'll talk about the Whataburger, Bassmaster Elite, and more. This is our first time getting together since the Pasquotank Bassmaster Elite Series event and the Tombigbee River Bassmaster Open, the last two events that we just had. And boy, let's just go ahead and start from the top. Before we get into Lake Hartwell, if you want to hear your preview of that, fantasy picks, you can check out the chapters of the podcast on YouTube as we have it spaced out based on topics. But that Pasquotank River Bassmaster Elite, the 45-pound, 7-ounce victory by Kyle Welcher, overwhelmingly the largest margin of victory in the history of the Bassmaster Elite Series. Man, what a dominating performance. We were having a hard time on live coming up with ways to describe how monumentally historic this beatdown was.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to describe that tournament. It was hard to put into words. Like by the time you got to the fourth day and, Welcher did his damage early on in that morning, it was like, what else do you say? Like you can't even put into words like the performance he put on, just exclude the rest of the top 10. But then, to have the gap between he and second place is like, when Walters did what he did at Fork in 2020, you looked at that and you thought, boy, it'd be really, really hard for this record to be broken. Like that in itself, like that margin of victory was significantly higher than what it was before, the record before. And then for Welcher just to go and do that was like, I mean, like, I don't even, how do you even put that into words? Like, you could give the rest of the top 10 3 more days of fishing, and they probably wouldn't be able to do
Man,
what Welcher did in four. And just the way he did it, the way it came together, everything about that tournament to me was so special for the sake of, the performance he put on. And then, think about like the crowds that weigh in. Obviously, being on site, that's one of the great benefits is getting to see the crowd. No pictures or videos do it justice how many people were there on Saturday and Sunday. I mean, it was a field of people. I mean, a sea of people as far as you could possibly see. And, we wanted to get, as many good photos and stuff as possible. And just to get in range of the back of the crowd to see the crowd in front of you, you had to walk like a half a mile or more just to get to the back of it. So, certainly a special victory for Kyle Welcher. Certainly just a special event, for a place that we have not visited in so long. Never on the Bassmaster Elite Series, and I think it exceeded expectations in every single way possible.
what's crazy is 45-7. I was just thinking about this looking at the results. 45-7 was the winning margin for Welcher to Brandon Lester, who got second. And that was two anglers fishing all 4 days. They both had 20 bass. You know what I'm saying? So everything was equal there. If you went 45 pounds below Brandon Lester, that would take you to a total of 28 pounds. And that would be right there at the 50 cut after they fished 3 days. So people were getting just above 28 pounds. I mean, yeah, just above 28 pounds through 3 days of fishing. And from them to second was the same margin from first to second. Yeah. So absolutely astounding. Let's go through that real quick. The historic mark of it. The Elite Series 10 plus pound victories. I have that in a spreadsheet. We are now up to, in year number 20 of the Bassmaster Elite Series, we have 18 victories that are 10 pounds or more. Now, with that being said, we have, of those 18 victories, 14 of them are from 10 pounds to 15 and change. So there's only 4 events that are 16 pounds or more, if that makes sense. 4 events that are 16 pounds or more, and the other 14 events are all 10 to 15 pounds roughly for the winning margin. So that just shows you that there's winning margins and what we consider a blowout normally out of the 200 plus, the 200 Elite Series events basically is a 6 to 8 pound victory is a blowout. 10 plus pounds is monumental. 15 gets you an elite status, a top five, and then anything over 15 is podium status basically. So largest margin of victory, Kyle Welcher over Brandon Lester, 45 pounds, 7 ounces, takes the top spot. The previous record was Patrick Walters over Keith Combs, 29 pounds, 10 ounces at Lake Fork in 2020. We eclipsed and jumped into the top three. It was second at the time last year at the St. John's, where Corey Johnston beat Brad Watley by 21 pounds 2 ounces. That was the second largest all time. Now it's third. Fourth place in 2021, Caleb Kufal beat Wes Logan by 17 pounds 14 ounces at Lake Gunnersville. And then the fifth largest margin of victory in Elite Series history was also this year. Brandon Polinick over John Garrett, 15 pounds 13 ounces. So we have two of the five largest margins of victories in Elite Series history this year. We have three of the five in the last calendar year, counting um, 2024 at the St. John's there. So interesting to see that dynamic, and honestly, like, yes, you could say it's forward facing driven. Everyone in the field has it and uses it, but in those specific events, maybe the field didn't take it as seriously as they should have in certain applications, because you think about perspective in Salt Springs at the St. John's. Corey is using that plus his eyes to sight fish big ones at a time of year where we hadn't been there, and everyone had basically written off the most popular spawning ground that we have at the St. John's. That always factors in February. They didn't expect it in April, but it did massively. And then you have Brandon Polinick on the best specific spot on Lake Okeechobee for that event, sharing it with other people, but being patient enough, using his electronics as well, but being patient, because there were three other guys who had the opportunity and actually had a head up on him after the first day of competition, that were leading him. They could have stayed and been patient and caught him as well, but they left. And so a little bit different there. And then this one, people were using it. We saw Easton Fothergill be highly successful with it around trees. Others were doing that as well, like Luke Palmer did at Santee Cooper a couple years ago. But Kyle Welcher was just on another planet. Best general region of the lake, with the technology, patience, understanding of not needing to run around, and it all comes together for a historic mark. So that's how it lays out in terms of history. I said it with Walters 2910. I don't think anyone's ever going to beat that. I think I can safely say if someone wins by 50 pounds, what are we going to do? I mean, that's crazy. So, but that's where we stand historically. Um, Biggest margins: Kyle Welcher, Patrick Walters, Corey Johnston, Caleb Kufal, Brandon Polinick, your top five. I think Polinick has two victories over 10 pounds. His Bull Shoals victory is also one over 10 pounds.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you brought up there, and it's absolutely true. Like clearly, forward-facing sonar has something to do with all those massive margins of victory. With Walters, that was kind of like the door opening in a lot of ways. Not
Yeah.
that it had not, had a role in tournaments before, but it was like really eye-opening just to see what it could do. And then again,
Think about this. Not to, sorry to interrupt, but we're they form a forward-facing sonar committee to evaluate the impact it has on the sport in during the 2024 season. And Walters set the world on fire with it in the fall of 2020. But it didn't seemingly get out of control in 21, 22, 23. It did at the end of the year. And so it's one of those things of like, what are you talking about? Like I was a part of a victory where I used it in 2016 with a buddy. Like it's just weird how we're aware of it, the technology, we see its use. It wins a tournament here, it wins a tournament there, but it wasn't dominated until the whole collective fishing industry got behind it. And now, you're gonna see the potential of it. So go ahead. But it is funny how Walters blew it out in 2020 in the fall, and it took 3.5 years for any league to let's start discussing this.
yeah, no, it's a decent point, and frankly, like I think it's just one of those deals where like, and still to this day, like there's obviously certain types of tournaments and certain, but styles of bodies of water where it's going to be just a massive factor. Like that's not nobody's trying to hide that. Like that's certainly the case. But yeah, going back to the point with forward facing sonar being a part of all those victories, like Walter's doing it unlike anybody else at that tournament. Like you said, at Salt Springs at the St. John's River, using it differently, I think, than a lot of people were. They're certainly, using it to the greatest extent. But I think one thing that makes, Welcher's victory so impressive is that he essentially, the only difference you could really make between what he was doing and a handful of other guys was doing, it's like he was not using perspective a lot of the time. He was using forward mode a
Yeah.
lot, because a lot of those beds and stumps and things he was targeting were, 4 to 6, 7, 8 foot deep. I know it's a pretty big range, but like they were deep enough to where you could pretty clearly see an image on forward view. But again, to me, that's what makes his performance so much more impressive, even beyond the numbers. The numbers make it, prove themselves. But he was doing essentially what a lot of other guys were doing and just did it so much better than the rest of the field, which, like, when you compare it to those other massive margin of victory, or margin victories that we just referenced, like there was something a little bit different that he was doing. Kyle Welcher was just the difference at that tournament. Like you want to pinpoint it to one thing or another. Like clearly was in a great area, clearly had the forward facing sonar dialed in, clearly had the right bait. Like he had everything going for him. But like Kyle Welcher just knocked their lights out. Like there's really nothing else you
And
can say other than he just
honestly,
performed greater than everyone.
the bait thing, not saying that the Crush City Bronco bug wasn't an X factor, but when you can't see fish bedding because the tannic dark nature of the water is good or the windy conditions at times, blowing chop on it, um, you kind of have to stick with something until you know that it's not working. Whereas when you're visually sight fishing, like we're going to see at Hartwell this coming Elite Series week, you're going to be switching and trying a bunch of different things. But when you can't physically see the way the bass is responding with your eyeballs, and you're just kind of seeing it move and turn on your electronics, then you're just interpreting those turns and moves as excitement. Whereas you see it with your eyes and you might interpret it as, he did a bigger circle than I want him to, let me change baits. Where Kyle was like, I have trust in this bait. I don't think the color's a problem because it's natural anyways. The only time we normally think color's a problem is when we're with white and we maybe want to go natural. And so I think that not even probably considering another bait was probably the best thing, because he's truly just trusting bait positioning and time spent on a fish versus seeing and our emotions getting the best of us watching a bedfish react or not react to a bait.
Well, and think about, like, I don't know, maybe it happened more than I give it credit for, but like I watched every second of live, was obviously did the live cast and the halftime show as well. It seemed like every time Welcher would find one, like traditional bed fishing, like you said, when you're visually bed fishing for them, even the best guys, your Coxes, Cook, Benton, a lot of those guys, they're gonna find a fish that's not worth the time, and is you're not gonna spend on it. It seemed like if Welcher found a fish, he caught it,
For
like
sure.
almost every time. Like
And I
even the
think you
ones
only
that
saw
took
I only
him,
saw him catch two pounders on the final day. That
yeah.
was
I
like
mean,
everything was big.
it just seemed like if he found one, he was able to get it to bite. So like again, it's probably a combination of all the things that he had going for him. Having electronics dialed in, the bait area. It's a combination of all of it. But
And
like,
nothing better to go to.
yeah, right, yeah, like nothing. Yeah, exactly, nothing to fall back on.
We said it on the podcast, and we said it at the screen. Matt Greshik. We were just when I was on the phone with Matt, we were talking about it, and I said, from what it sounds like, the 5 miles around Elizabeth City is the best place to be on the Pasquotank River. So what that tells me, Matt, is if someone's not on the phone with you getting this info, which I believe our anglers are not calling locals to get info, um, that I now know that. But with the anglers not knowing that and not a lot of history there, they don't know what to the Google to know if it's around Elizabeth City. You're not going to have a local write up of a tournament say like, yeah, they stayed within eyesight of the ramp. They're not going to do that.
They're not going to
And
tell.
yeah, they're not going to say that. And so what that tells me is someone's going to suck. It's going to be too windy. The only thing they found was 100 miles away, 50 miles away. And because it wasn't good enough, too windy, or they're sucking, they're going to stay. And they're going to be shocked when they catch them. And that is exactly what Kyle Welcher did. And that is exactly what me and Matt were discussing. And Matt giving the weight to Elizabeth City and that general region of the Pasquotank, like immediately it was like, wow, someone's probably going to win and they're not going to know it after day one. They're just going to be like, wow, this paid off big time. And then all of a sudden the next day, and then the next day. Did I think that he was going to go 30, 30, 34? No, I did not. I did not think that that was going to be the case. But I thought 2 30-pound days, he was well on his way to coasting, Kyle. Well on his
Sure.
way to
Yeah.
coasting.
Put himself in a great position after the first 2 days and then just went ahead and exceeded those 2 days
To
on the third
think,
day.
yeah, to think that
Um,
his 2 30-pound days had him at 60 pounds and on pace for 120, and he had a letdown of a final day and he got to 118. He almost did
yeah.
his last 2 days, and his first 2 days were almost identical, except it was 230s and very consistent. And it was a 34 and a 24, you know?
And I think that the way he described it on camera is just so telling to exactly what you were saying. Is he said on day one, he stopped there just because he wanted to give himself a chance to get lucky close. I'd say he got more than lucky. I think he was, and I say lucky, like that was the term he used. I mean, I don't think there was luck involved other than like it happening quick on the first day. Like that's the only element
Yeah,
of like
you don't
that
have a chance to
happening
get
led
lucky
him
if
to
you run
success. Yeah,
immediately. Yeah, like if you stay,
100%.
you give yourself a chance. If you don't, then you're completely just marking it out. And the only reason you stay is if you have a terrible day one. You know, you go the next day and stay.
But yeah, no, just an incredible performance. I think one we're gonna remember for a long time. Um, you know, that
And
was the
his
thing.
first
I was
trophy.
I think that there was more people like on board with what we're talking about than what I expected. Like a lot of times you get these giant runaway tournaments, you're like, there's probably enough people out there that are like, I'm not going to bother watching because like I already know who's going to win, or like I get it. Like if you're watching a sporting event and the Chiefs are up 48-3 on the Panthers, like there's not a lot of people just tuning in to watch. But the numbers on everything were exceptional through the last 2 days. Even with it being such a decided tournament, which I think a lot of people are like us in the fact that like you're watching it and you're just like, this is history that's not going to be beat. Like this is not like this is a once in a lifetime thing as far as the margin of victory and the just pure domination that Kyle had there. So really an awesome tournament and certainly look forward to going back at some point. I hope.
Yeah, it's like if they had Twitter back when Kobe hit 81 points in a game, you would have people tweeting, he's at 50 in the beginning of the third, and you're like, I gotta watch, and you tune in. You know, it was like I think they did the countdown like from 50 points for LeBron because that was conceivable you could do in a game, you know, at his age when he was gonna break the all-time scoring record, and it was like 36 more. 18 more, and you're like, I got to just see this one basket going, wow, he broke the record, crazy, you know, like you just want to see if you're gonna have some BTA, if you're gonna have some belt to, you know what, I want to watch. I don't, you know, whatever, we're gonna watch it happen. And so yeah, Kyle dominating. Someone said, oh, what's the phrase? Let me pull it up real quick. I got to try to find it, but they were basically saying, I won't get it perfect because I don't have time to pull it up. um but it was basically saying Kyle Welcher showed up to the Pasquotank with catching bass and chewing, or with kicking butt and chewing bubble gum, and he's all out of bubble gum or something like that. That's what he was saying. Like Kyle came in to do two things: kick some butt and chew some bubble gum, and he's all out of chewing bubble gum. And so I thought that was funny. But absolutely dominant performance. First Elite Series victory for him. First B.A.S.S victory other than Angler of the Year, which he did that in 2023. He's been close to the Century Club as well, so he can boom knock that out there. And I'll say this: let me pull up the Century Club um, list where he falls, because that was the 70th occurrence of someone breaking the Century Club. So we've got 70. Oh, I didn't even move him in there. I just like walked away. Oh, no, I did move him in there. He is with 118 pounds, 12 ounces. I texted Williamson this because they're buddies and roommates and friends. And I said, if he gets 118 pounds, 3 ounces, he's going to beat you by a spot in your Falcon weight. And he said, that makes sense. Like Kyle, of course, is going to beat me by just a little bit. So Kyle beat him and becomes the 13th highest weight in B.A.S.S history. And Kyle, the 12 other highest weights ahead of him are Falcon, 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 Fork, Falcon, 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 Fork, 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 Clear Lake, Falcon, Pasquotank River. That's crazy to say.
Pretty
No
good company.
disrespect to Pasquotank, but when it's Falcon, Fork, and Clear Lake, and then right below it you get Santee Cooper, that's crazy. That's
Those are
no one saw this coming of, oh yeah, you could break 100. I didn't think it'd be 13th all time, highest weight, and the only ones beating it are an untouched Falcon the first time we went there, and Lake Fork during the pre-spawn with Scope, and then Steve Kennedy Clear Lake, you know, mega swim bait fish. Crazy.
those are all places conceivably you'd see 100 pound. Like you'd be surprised if you didn't reach 100 pounds in those tournaments. But yeah, to think that it's up there with the likes of those lakes, um, really speaks volumes to not only how good the fishery is, but just how dominant of a performance. Again, you can't say that enough. I think everybody was in the same boat, like towards the tail end of day four, trying to figure out how to put this into words. It's like it really, like there's nothing you can say to do it justice. But yeah, congrats to Kyle getting his first Elite Series win there, and yeah, very very impressive.
Now let's go to another shocking and impressive open real quick. We'll talk about this for just a moment, but Tombigbee River, man, you want to talk about two fisheries back to back that we have no idea what they're going to be like, and if they were bombs, we would be like, well, we tried it. But we hadn't been to the Tombigbee River in 21 years. 2004 when we had an E50 in the May time period and an Open in October. 2004 was the last time we were at the Tombigbee, and back then I believe they had grass topped out in mats most places on that fishery. Now it's more like a river where it's a lot of rock, a lot of wood, flats, stumps, and a little bit of water willow here and there. Tombigbee was awesome. It came down to the final day, three people within a pound. The winner only had four on the final day. Trey Schroeder, congratulations to him. Former McKendree University angler, made the bracket two times with Tyler Christie, and he gets an Opens victory and a spot in the Classic. And he beat out Stephen Browning, so he carried the final day lead into. He was the day two leader. Tyler Schroeder or Trey Schroeder was, but Stephen Browning, absolutely phenomenal morning, phenomenal final day, and I was shocked when the scales hit and Trey with four fish won by 8 ounces. I tell you, I had a text to Stephen Browning waiting to send that says, "Congratulations, what a week. You crushed it today." And when Trey weighed in, I backspaced that text and said, "Great week, Stephen. I thought you had it." Because he was putting on a show all day on live. And when Tyler, not well, I keep saying Tyler now because I just mentioned Tyler Christie. When Trey only had four, it's not like he was catching them and culling and catching them and culling. He was getting them in the boat so quick because time was running out, and we didn't get a great look at him, I guess. But one of those threes was probably a 4 plus, and some of those twos were threes, and he did not have a 1 pounder. It was 2.5 at least. Because boy, he was shocked. I was shocked. Steven was shocked. Hank was shocked. The crowd was shocked. Kyle, you were watching the weigh and I bet you were shocked.
I was absolutely shocked. I don't know another way to describe it. I was taking a Snapchat video of the weigh-in. I was about to send to Bo and a group snap, over what we thought was going to be Steven's, win. And like you said, it was one of those crazy deals. Like I watched live from beginning to end, and obviously you commentated it, so you did. And it was like I never remember seeing Trey catch like what I would consider like a giant or, giant for there even. But, rock solid performance from both of them.
I thought he was going to have like
Certainly.
10 to 10 and a
Yeah.
half and come up. I thought Trey was going to come up about a pound short or something
And
like that.
it was
Yeah.
unlike Steven, what Steven had on Bass Track was less because, we stopped an hour short of weigh-in on live. So like we were fairly sure what he had at that time, but we weren't sure obviously if he had culled up. He ended up culling up to get to whatever he had on the final day, But with Trey, he never got to a limit. So you're like, whatever he has on Bass Track is
That's what
is
he left the day
gonna be
with.
right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, it's not like
Yeah.
you called out a a keeper with four keepers in the box. So for him to have what he had was just such a shock because I just don't think anybody, including himself, like he was very open about it. Once he won, that like he had no anticipation of having that much weight. But again, a guy that we had on the college prospects list multiple times. Obviously well
Slow out of the
versed.
gate. Uh, the first half of last year, his first year in the Open, slow out of the gate. But then he
Sure,
started getting some steam at the end of the year, really strong. And boy, it started strong this year.
for sure. And just a, awesome performance by him. And then also just the fishing there was really fun to watch. I thought, like, I don't think, I mean,
If
I'm
you
sure
don't like
somebody,
scope, Kyle,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
this was the
Like
tournament for you to watch.
100%. And I like, frankly, like, I'm not, I have no idea if this would ever happen. I really don't. But I would love to see an elite there because you get that many guys. There's plenty of guys that aren't, huge, but that tournament just set up so well to do anything but live scope because everybody on the final day, I'm sure somebody made it work throughout the course of the tournament, but nobody on the final day, to my
No,
knowledge, or what
not at
it
all.
looked like was even remotely touching it. And that was just the deal. So awesome fishery, looked like a ton of fun to cover. And just the way the guys were catching them, swimming a jig, throwing a shallow running crankbait, vibrating jig, flipping, like it was a very, very fun tournament to watch. And again, another place that I really do hope we go back to very soon.
For sure. Absolutely. The opens are always fun. I had Larry Nixon, the general, in here. If you
That was
haven't seen
great.
it, with us being on Roku Live and Bassmaster.com, we don't have, there's rules that you follow with like FS1. Like I always give it 2 weeks after the broadcast to put up the live shows on YouTube. But normally it might be 3 weeks or so because the 2 week mark, like for the Pasquotank, 2 weeks is this week. Like it falls on the Hartwell. I'm not putting live archives up during a live tournament that we're doing, so it'll wait till next week. But with the opens being on Roku and .com, I had it up the next day, and it was YouTube. Saturday evening you could watch the live show. Did great numbers there as well, but fun with Larry Nixon in studio with us. Kyle, let's get to Hartwell. We've spent
One
a
of
lot
my,
of time
I
talking
gotta
about those
say,
other ones, but yeah,
there's one thing I wanted to mention. Larry Nixon, number one, was fantastic on live. Loved every second of having him. But when he described the gator grass as being tough as a boot, that was maybe my favorite part of the entire. I mean, I've obviously heard the expression plenty of times, but it just came so out of left field, and I was like, God, I wish we'd have Larry Nixon on every single tournament. But
I was
it was,
talking.
coverage was great.
I was trying to paint the picture of like these guys were fishing the water well up close and personal with a swim jig, and it was below and in there, and we were talking about the silt and then right around the edge, or right up in the grass. And so I was like, I'm surprised no one pulled off the grass and threw a chatterbait around the edges of it. And then he thought I meant throwing a chatterbait in the water wheel, and he's like, yeah, you'll get hung up in that stuff all the time. I was like, well, now I feel like it looks like I didn't know what I'm talking about at all, but I was casting differently than where he was wanting to cast in the story. So funny though. But Larry, he had to wake up so early because he lives about an hour and 15 minutes from studio, and we broadcasted an hour earlier live than we normally do. So
Well,
I
live
think
started at
Larry,
4:30 a.m. Central Time, I'm pretty sure.
I think
Pretty
Larry
sure I
left
didn't
his
notice.
house at midnight. And yeah, he's
I'm sure
did not.
people were coming back from the bars and live was still starting. I mean, it was like the earliest start time I can remember in a really long time, which was fun because the early morning bite was good, but good God, it did start early.
It did indeed. It was crazy to walk out of the studio. Well, I didn't leave because I waited till way and was done. But like 1 o'clock, like you could be done. You're like, did we have a tournament today? We were like done at lunch.
One.
Also, I'll say this: we had catered food when we're live. This is the stuff that fans who appreciate, like just they stuff that they don't get to see. We have catered food here during live, and so we had spaghetti at 9 a.m. because that was we had done 3 hours of live already. So 9 o'clock break we had spaghetti instead of like breakfast. I was like, what are we? I'm eating legit garlic bread and spaghetti at 9 a.m. I was
Like
like, what
you're,
time is
you're
it right now? What day is it?
probably supposed to be eating it like Buddy the Elf with maple syrup and candy on top of it if you're
I was
eating it
like,
at 9 in the morning.
let me get this meatball real quick at 9 a.m. Give me locked in for the last 3 hours. Let's get to Lake Hartwell. fourth stop of the Bassmaster Elite Series. If those of you who are joining in just to watch the preview of Hartwell, sorry you had to put up with all that before, but we had some ground to cover and some fun events to talk about. I also to wrap up the Tombigbee, Matt Adams called me this morning, like his fifth top 10 in the last 9 opens, and
Killing
he said, "I am so tired of making top tens without winning. Like it's
it.
starting to." For his words, it's starting to piss me off that I can't close the deal and win one of these things. And I was like, well, there's a lot of guys who are an 80th that are really pissed off that they can't make a check. So you got to fight your battles, buddy. One of the two. But it's good to see guys are not just settling with some success, that they want to win and do their best. So Lake Hartwell, mid to late April. Well, late April. It's the 21st right now, Monday evening when this airs, and final day of practice, first day of practice is underway and done today. 2 more days of practice, and this will be different than the last time we were here in April when Brandon Cobb won, because when Brandon Cobb won, fish were getting on the bed, and in certain parts of the lake, the herring spawn was firing up and kind of overlapping. So you had bass spawn and herring spawn overlapping in places. Here now, they've been on the bed for at least a week or two, maybe 10 to 18 days. That first week of April, it got real warm. Fish started going up there, and so there'll be sections of the lake. You may see people doing herring spawn stuff towards the top of the lake, and people sight fishing at the bottom of the lake until, and if we keep having this warmer weather, it can transition to where like the guys are running out of sight fish on the bottom of the lake and they just go out to the point and start herring spawn in the morning. You'll start to see some guys, it'll start to show up like the shad spawn does. Hey, I started seeing shad spawn a little bit. I started seeing the herring spawn go on a little bit. And so we're going to have a little bit of both herring spawn, some bass spawn, and depending on if people go way up the Tougaloo, way up the Seneca, you may not see the herring spawn. If you're on the main lake, the main drag, just a little bit into the creeks, you'll see it. So I think we're going to see a variety of things. And according to some local guys, I talked to Tyler Campbell, talked to Andy Wicker, you don't need your forward-facing sonar to catch them. Obviously, we know the herring spawn's a great visual place. It's also a great place of faith. You know, like Easter was yesterday, and if people have a hard time having faith, well, on the herring spawn, sometimes you just have to believe they're on that point and throw, 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 and they will show themselves. But you don't have to necessarily see them doing it to believe that they're there.
Yeah, no, I think that's what's going to make this event so interesting is what you said might be true. I certainly think that we will see it play in a similar way that we saw, with Walters at Murray. When he was using it, in certain times when the fish would go down, just trying to keep track of the bait
For
and
sure.
where things were happening. But like so much of that was so visual with your eyeballs. Like I think that was one of the big misconceptions. Like I covered Walters every day at Murray in that tournament, and again, I'm not saying he didn't use it at all. That's not the case. But almost every fish I saw him weigh was a visual bite, like that he saw, busting on a blue, blueback or a threadfin or whatever it might have been. So I mean, that's certainly a deal, and again, it'll play to some degree there. But the fact that it is still April, the fact that there are still going to be fish up shallow, plenty of them. Sight fishing, we see that all the time. Obviously Drew Benton winning at Murray a few years ago when we thought that, the spawn was, towards the tail end, then even later then. So, thought it was going to be even less of a factor. So I'm sure there'll be guys that find them. You can always count on, or I hope we can count on anyways, there being some good visual bites. Who can forget,
For sure.
that some Blaylock's popper catches, obviously a buzzbait is a big time player there. It wouldn't be surprising at all to see some guys like Brandon Cobb be able to mix that in. Um, I think it's going to be a very, very interesting tournament
Stabile.
for that sake because you can see, yeah, sure. I mean, there's going to be plenty of visual bites for the herring spawn guys. But, I think that the mixture of the two things will allow certain anglers to have, a morning game plan and then like an afternoon game plan, which to me in those types of tournaments is always interesting because, let's say a guy's super dialed into the herring spawn in the morning, knows that that's going to get, you know, it'll fizzle out to a certain point, at let's say I'm just making up a number, I don't know, a 10 or 11, whatever, that's probably too late. But and then they can spend the rest of their day either going and looking or, like I said, throwing a top water, trying to catch a big one up shallow. I think that there's going to be a lot of like cat and mouse game with that, when to stay, when to go, which should make it a really interesting tournament. And frankly, Hartwell is just such a awesome tournament lake for that reason
Absolutely.
specifically, because you can always do, run so many different patterns and so many different things that it makes Hartwell such a special location. But time of the year, location, one of the best playing fields you can possibly create. I mean, I think that it's going to be a fantastic tournament at Hartwell.
Yeah, you kind of have to if you've never fished a tournament at Hartwell. When I talked about the scope in 2016, that was the lake. I was at Hartwell in the fall, and it was the OG Panoptics Gen 1 came out, and we caught a couple fish using, being able to see some brush pile fish or whatever. Um, but Hartwell is one of those lakes where you have to have two game plans minimum. Like Christie's Classic, Jordan Lee, his Classic, Cobb, his Elite. Like every single event that's in this early March to late April period, you have to have two game plans. And knowing when to switch gears on them is the huge deal with that. Yeah, so you got the Seneca to the north. That's the North River that flows from Clemson. You got the Tougaloo that goes to the west, and they collide in that Green Pond area. And then you get down to the mid lake, plenty of main lake pockets, shoals, points to hit there. And the east side of the lake gets ignored a lot. Pretty solid. Has some decent high spots and areas, long extended points at times. You get down to that bottom, the Hartwell, Georgia portion of it, the bottom left. That or the southwest portion of Hartwell, it's just top to bottom. I could see it get one in a lot of places. We always think about that Beaver Dam Creek area in between the Seneca and the Tougaloo, where my thumbs are touching, basically. That the way the lake outlines, um, that's always like a if it's recently rained in the spring and it's a little dirtier, that's a place you can be. I don't know how it'll factor with not a ton of rain and not a ton of runoff to make it like Hartwell hasn't been low in the fall and the winter like it has been in the years past. There's not a lot of dog fennel and stuff growing up, but plenty of places to fish, good areas as well. So I'm excited to see that how it plays out. Um, we really don't have. I think we have one Elite Series event we've been here. Hartwell in 2019 is the only Elite. We've got classics, from Alton Jones to Casey Ashley to Jordan Lee to Jason Christie. Those are the classics that we've had here. And those first two classics I mentioned, '08 and 15, were ultra cold classics. The 18 and 22 classics were more of a half a stage ago, like half a it was the pre-spawn to spawn. This is going to be the spawn to post-spawn, the spawn to herring spawn type deal. And when you mentioned Murray for Patrick Welcher's victory, that was like March 10th through the 13th or something. So it's like 2.5 weeks later in the year than this is. So we had a lot less spawning fish. You had to use your electronics after 9 a.m. because they just shut down. The whole lake shut down after 9 a.m. if you didn't catch them early. I think we're gonna see people catch them all day. I think you're gonna be able to see them catch them all day, and and I think that we'll see. I mean, I'm about as chalk as it gets. So unless you got other questions or thoughts about the actual playing field of Hartwell, I'm ready to get into our picks because Hartwell's a place that we could cover the whole entire lake, but you just kind of got to watch Bass live. You're just gonna see we're gonna see a lot of different stuff factor and play. And you'll see some of the same docks in the background on a couple cameras as guys try and test areas, and you'll see a rotation. You'll start to know, like if we have Brandon Cobb on day one and he continues to do well and we have him all 4 days or something, you'll start to see, hey, here's his milk run because I see that dock with a green light on the end of it every day he starts. And then he goes over here and there's that one tree on the point, and then like you'll start to see that these guys have a milk run and it's not luck, there's a science to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ronnie, let's get into some Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing picks. I will let you go through your A through E. Sounds like you're going pretty chalk. Few of my picks are
Yeah.
chalk as well. So give me your buckets A through E for Rapala Bassmaster fantasy fishing.
Well, I am going somewhat chalk. I do think on herring fisheries, blueback herring lakes, that's a different kind of advantage. It's like if you know tidal places, it's like if you know um I don't know, maybe it's like boulder fisheries where the boulders aren't moving and you can kind of know you know what's going to happen. With the blueback herring, you gotta have somewhat experience, especially if it's gonna be a part of the game plan like a herring spawn would be. It's hard to ignore the herring spawn and do well here. So
And
I've got
I would to go even further than that. I mean, think about how many guys talk about how much they hate herring fisheries. Like
they're
it's
puzzling at
kind
times,
of one of
yeah,
those deals. Like there's plenty of in between, like guys that have had success moderately here and there, but like there are guys that genuinely love herring fisheries, and there's guys that genuinely can't stand them. So to your point, certainly very hit or miss as far as guys' feelings towards these types of fisheries.
for sure. So I am somewhat chalk, more chalk than I've been in a long time. And so bucket A, I got Shane LeHue. Bucket B, Paul Marks. Bucket C, Emil Wagner. Bucket D, Brandon Cobb. And bucket E, I have Jeff Gustafson. Who's in your bucket A through E, and then we'll dissect.
We certainly share some. Bucket A, I'm going Shane LeHue. Bucket B was very tempted by Paul Marks, but I'm going Patrick Walters, even more chalk. Couldn't justify it. Bucket C, Emil Wagner, sure that pick. Bucket D, Brandon Cobb. And Bucket E, just a gut feeling. I got Matt Robertson in Bucket E.
Okay, well, with LeHue, Wagner, and Cobb, we can all kind of explain it. But with Shane, I was torn a little bit. Jake Whitaker's been fishing really well, and when I am going chalk, there will be two or three anglers in each bucket that's like they could be considered chalk. I could switch out and substitute a couple people, and I still have a chalk lineup. And LeHue is lowly rated, 5.8%. You got Trey McKinney at 33 in this bucket. A couple guys with 7 with John Garrett and Kiyoya Fujita. 13 for Jay Shakirat. And Kyle Welcher with 6.5. So 5.8 for Shane LeHue. Thought that was good enough. And Jake is at 0.9%, just under 1%. So my thought here is there wasn't a tremendous difference in ownership percentage between my two chalk guys. If I looked at this whole bucket and you said, give me two chalk guys, LeHue and Whitaker, there's only a 4% gap between them, basically, then, or a 5% gap between them. That's a small enough gap that I can go with the higher one without feeling wrong. So 5.8%, I went with LeHue there. And did you have a similar thought process, or who was another angler you were considering?
Yeah, so for me, it was LeHue just based on number one, herring fisheries success at Hartwell, the 2019 Elite Series, top five there. Um, and he's obviously fishing well. And I don't know, it's to me, it's guys that I feel like can mix different things together. Like we were talking about, like having multiple patterns. Shane LeHue is so similar to Brandon Cobb in a lot of ways in that, you could easily see him having success early in the morning with a herring fish, and then also going up shallow and throwing a wacky worm, throwing a buzz bait, throwing a top water, doing whatever it may be up shallow to get a big largemouth bite. And we obviously know he's a very good sight fisherman. So if he's got some fish located on beds, I think that's another big player for him. But secondarily, I had Will Davis Jr. I
Mm.
think that ends up what ends up happening a lot, and we talk about this a lot in fantasy fishing, is like somebody has the hot hand and you just neglect them like all season long. I know we talked about this the last podcast.
I think it's
Um,
Hackney and Walters are the two that we just like pick until they like either get their act together or they screw up. One of the two.
And Will Davis obviously has had a history of success at Hartwell, at herring fisheries, places that set up similar. You don't necessarily assume him to be a herring guy, but I mean, he's done well at both the South Carolina fisheries as such.
I could
Smith
see
Lake.
I can
I
see
mean,
Coosa
he's
River and Smith Lake success for Will Davis translating. So I like that pick as well.
yeah, I
And he
think
likes to fish with his life jacket like Brian knew. So if he needs to run and gun, he always has it on. And
quick,
I'm like,
yeah,
you're not at
agile.
a tail race, bro. Take it off.
Agile. So I could easily see Will Davis Jr. doing well here. Bucket B, you went against Patrick Walters. Why?
It's the same type of deal. If I picked out, there's actually like four chalk guys in this bucket, maybe five. This is kind of a loaded bucket actually with Christie and Cook. If you're thinking Spawn, there's
B is
two
loaded.
options.
B is very
Um,
loaded.
yeah, if you're thinking Christie, Cook for sight fishing, you can. If you're thinking just finesse fishing in general, Felix, Fouts, Taku are all here. You got Lester in there. It's a really, really good bucket. Brandon Polonick's in this bucket. Luke Palmer's done well here. But the chalk that I would consider would be Paul Marks, Patrick Walters, Tucker Smith, KJ Queen. So Tucker Smith isn't from here, but has fished a lot of fisheries like this and has fished plenty at Hartwell in tournaments over his B.A.S.S time to know Hartwell very well, considers it one of his favorite lakes. And so Paul Marks, though, I love Patrick. There's a 40% pick difference between them. And when I was talking about two chalk guys, so I listed a bunch of guys that could be considered chalk. But if you had to narrow it down to just two, I'm going Walters and Paul Marks. And there's a 40% gap between them. I went with Paul Marks. He lives on herring fish all the time at Lake Lanier. That's what he's wired to do. Very good at doing so. He knows all the tricks. Walters knows all the tricks. It's not that I don't doubt Walters. I absolutely not. Probably well, I know he is one of my suggestions for live day one. So we should have, a camera in his boat most likely. But I think that Marks is about as equal as you could get to somebody like a Patrick Walters because of his extensive blueback herring knowledge and history here at Hartwell as well.
Yeah, no, I think Paul Marks is a very, very good pick. And for him to be as low as he is, player percentage wise, 4.2%, certainly a risk possibly worth taking there. I just couldn't go against Patrick Walters. Um, it just seems too good to be true. A bad, uncharacteristically tough tournament at Pasquotank River. Don't see that very often from him, but I think he's going to bounce back in a big way. And to me, I'm on the opposite side of the fence with the percentages. Like, I think that percentage is so high that it's like if you pick against it and lose, you know,
Yeah,
44,
that's
almost half
yes.
the players are beating you. But if Paul Marks does well, or, one of those other guys you mentioned, then that's a huge win as well. So I'm going with the higher percentage, Patrick Walters. If he was at 1%, I would pick him. If he was at 100%, I would probably pick him. So I'm going
I
Walters.
I love Walters. There's not been a bigger cheerleader saying how great Walters is before he actually showed his greatness at Bassmaster than me. Like literally knew him so well, watching him competing against him and being friends with him that I'm not shocked his career trajectory. I will say if last year's rookie class was overall fantastic, this year's rookie class might be the best blueback herring rookie class we'll ever have. Tucker Smith, Paul Marks, Emil Wagner, Cody Meyer. Like
Well,
there's just
when
so many really good guys. You could go all rookies, and we could have five rookies in the top 10. No joke on the final day. I wouldn't be shocked. This is their
100%.
tournament. Yeah.
That is one thing to be said, and I wrote that in my fantasy column. Like, this is certainly a tournament where you could definitely justify picking a lot of rookies. Um,
And it's
Number one,
it's
like
not
you said,
forward facing. It is they
they
are
just
so good
all,
with it, but they're all blueback herring specialists,
no doubt.
which goes that means they have to use their electronics more, which means they're more dialed into it. It's just it's a cause and effect. I fish
Just
on
to
a
put
blueback
in
herring fishery. I'm gonna be good with electronics. It's hard to do both unless you're fishing blueback herring lakes that have spotted bass and you're only fishing largemouth. Like that's the only way you can avoid that.
to put in perspective too, like we've talked a lot throughout the season about our predicting each rookie's highest finish of the season, like what Elite Series top.
I think I put
When
yeah.
you would go through the list, like of every pro, every rookie, you're like, well, Hartwell is really what I want to do, but I'll do something else just to be different. It's like you could justify putting Hartwell down for like pretty much every single one of the rookies, and you'd feel pretty confident about it, especially the younger guys when you're talking about Marks, Wagner, Tucker Smith,
Easton listed
Easton
as his favorite
Fothergill.
lake. Yeah.
Yeah, like 100%. I wrote about that in my column as well. Like claims it's his favorite lake, and he's on a roll. So if you want to go with some rookies, this would probably be the time to do it. But Bucket C, speaking of Emil Wagner, we both went with Emil. I think that the logic is still the exact same as the way you mentioned for Marks. Obviously, a Lake Lanier guy, not hard to justify, him potentially having a big event here. Um, would not be surprising at all to see him on the final day. And definitely didn't sneak under the radar as much as you might have hoped. That his percentage was lower, 12.8% right now. You've got Jordan Lee at 20.8, Justin Hamner at 24.4, Stetson at nearly 10. So, obviously a couple guys taking up a large percentage of the playing percentage there. But Emil Wagner at 12.8, definitely not as sneaky as maybe we were hoping he would be in Bucket C.
I was just hoping people didn't scroll all the way to the bottom of the bucket. They
Yeah.
picked it before they got to the bottom. But no, Emil, fantastic. I think one thing about these young guys, they knew how to do the herring spawn and fish for blueback herring eaters without electronics. Silver top waters, quick jointed swim baits, flukes, shaky heads, whatever. They did that without it, and now they've learned how to do the herring spawn with it. And that I don't expect there to be a drop off. Like that's where it's not like, oh, you have to find the best spot on the lake. No, they have to find good spots that they can make great by maximizing what they see with their eyes and then what they see on their graph. So Emil, absolutely fantastic fisherman, great guy as well. And he keeps it very simple. He keeps it very simple. And that's probably a good thing. Just like this guy in Bucket D, Brandon Cobb, we both have him picked the guy with the most tangible info and expertise at this lake. And he knows how to balance a game plan very well. If he can just not be so darn negative to himself about a tough practice day or whatever, then Cobb would be in a lot of tournaments. I heard that he was just negative at the Pasquotank and he didn't do well. Like if he just doesn't let himself get negative on an off day, this one's it's there for you. It's on the tee, and they give you a bat, just take a good swing. And so I think you could see him instead of necessarily mixing the game plans. I'll see him mix the game plans for sure, but I could see him start the tournament um, either on sight fish specifically and that be his day one game plan, or opposite end of the lake on the herring spawn, like type of deal. So we'll see how he mixes it, but the timing will be critical for Cobb. And I didn't even care who else was in his bucket. The only bucket that would be poor would be if he was matched with Patrick Walters, and then I have to think about it pretty good.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Brandon Cobb, it's hard to envision a tournament where he's not able to perfectly mix the two, herring spawn and fishing shallow, spawning fish. Same way I just described with LaHue. I mean, whether it be a wacky rig like he won the 2019 event, that was a big part of his game plan. Top water, you could easily see him doing that up shallow with a buzz bait, popper, things like that. Um, I don't know. It's just hard to imagine Brandon Cobb not having a big event here. Um, as good as he is at Hartwell, as good as he is in the springtime, and just as good as he is in general, even despite the 34.5% player percentage. What's crazy about Bucket D, like we already talked about Easton Fothergill, so it's not to say we haven't even discussed it, but Easton's picked at a higher percentage than Cobb is, which like again, I get it. I think Easton's going to have a great event too.
I'm not
Like
touching that though.
that's crazy. Like that's just a crazy thought to think that.
71% between two of them.
Yeah, and again, I could see either of them. I mean, I could see them both being in the top 10 and it being a matter of like one place between them. That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. But it was just surprising to see that many people are going with Easton over Brandon Cobb in that bucket. Not that picking Brandon Cobb in bucket D is like going out on a limb, but you're like, he's not even the highest percentage player in the bucket. Like that's crazy. Um, but moving on, bucket E. Who did you have in bucket E again?
I got Gussie.
I like it. I like it. Um,
He's got to turn it around. Gussie's had a poor three events to start his Elite Series not career, Elite Series season. But this is his style. He spent a few days at Lanier like a lot of our anglers did to kind of get prepped. There were some anglers fishing a tournament at Norman, some went to Murray, some went to Lanier, whatever fits your fancy. But Gussie, if they're not smallmouth, he wants to fish for spotted bass on lakes like Hartwell. So I expect him to do well. Um, the only other person I probably considered in this would be Jason Williamson. He is a South Carolinian and a blueback specialist as well. I think that Gussie knows. I think a lot of Bucket E guys know, but I think Gussie knows right now that he's got to catch him right here. Like this is the you don't catch him right here, and you're in Bucket E, you're done. Like there's you're gonna be hard pressed with four elites in the books if you haven't caught them at least halfway in a tournament yet, gotten close to the cut line. There's no classic shot unless you catch them this week. So I think they've got to catch them, and Gustafson is my pick for this style.
I like it. That is certainly a good pick, and I dig it. Matt Robertson for me. When I was going through making my picks, I just made that one completely based on gut instinct.
Because he's had
No,
on him tournaments at Hartwell.
no, not even that. To be completely honest with you, it never crossed my mind once. It was
When you
basically
said it, that was
thinking,
the first thing I thought was, well, he does have tournaments, he was there.
never even crossed my mind. I know exactly what you're talking about, but like when I made the pick, it just like I saw his name and I thought, my goodness, like I don't know, like at 5% at the time, I was like, I feel like that's a really solid pick. But then you go look at his tournament results there, and like it's not nothing, just crazy. Like you look back, an Open in 2020 finished 66th, 2022 Open 51st. Let's see. Um, 46th at the Classic in Greenville. I mean, out of 50 some odd anglers, not great. Um, it's just 100% a gut feeling for me. Saw what he was able to do at Murray.
He can't drive an hour and a half from weigh in here, so that's a good thing.
So I don't know. I just got Matt Robertson. I think he's going to bounce back at Hartwell. There are plenty of good choices in Bucket E of guys you could easily justify. Obviously, Greg Hackney being a guy that coming off a win at the NPFL on Norman, could easily see him doing well. But every time I pick him, I think I'm like his bad luck charm. So at this point, I'm just like rooting for his success by not picking him, because I think I've been his bad luck so far. But a lot of guys in Bucket E that you could certainly justify, but I'm just strictly going on a gut feeling, and I'm going with Matt Robertson.
I like it. So overall, my five were I just closed out of it, but it was Shane LaHue, Paul Marks, Emil Wagner, Brandon Cobb, Jeff Gustafson, Bucket A
Correct.
through E. And I closed my eyes because it helps me remember, just like when you turn down the
Yeah.
volume, when you're trying to make a turn on the road, when you're
Yeah.
driving.
I can't turn that down. I can't see straight. Okay, so let's move over to TH Marine Bassmaster Pick'em Challenge. I think of all the weeks that we've done this, I think this might be my favorite group of matchups because I think they're all very, very difficult.
I'm
You were
beating you in
celebrating.
this, by the way.
Yeah, you were celebrating because evidently it turns out you're beating me in this. Good for you. It's the
I
only
gotta
thing you're
I gotta
beating
protect the
me in.
lead now, so I'm gonna pick the
Yeah.
same ones you do all year, the rest of the year.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll get to Drain the Lake. And well, actually, we already talked about Rapala. What percentage were you at Rapala? We can just go over that real quick while we're here.
Oh, what percentage was I? What percentage was I? I think I'm passing. I think I have a passing grade. I'm at 87.4, 87.3. I don't know why I just lied. 87.4 was what my lie was. 87.3 is the truth. So,
Or sounded much better. In Rapala, I'm at 95.8, so
yeah.
get you a taste of that.
That's why I'm celebrating. Pick'em's the only one I'm beating you in. Calm
All right, fair
down.
enough. Fair enough.
Okay.
Well, congratulations by one pick. It's
Seven
going to come around
matchups
here.
picked by Chad Mannering. Here we go.
So, matchup number one. Okay, we've got the two previous Hartwell Classic champions. We got Jordan Lee versus Jason Christie. Who you got?
We're gonna differ probably. I got Jay Lee.
I also have Jordan Lee.
Oh, we're the same. Okay.
I think he's going to bounce back here
I
after a
think
tough one.
I'm gonna trip the field up there. I think a lot of fields picking Christie.
Yeah, that's one you could easily manipulate,
Rope a dope. Yep.
Um,
AOY's
AOY tie,
tied. So
number two matchup.
Will Davis Jr. is leading AOY because of tiebreaker, but they're technically tied, him and John Garrett. So Will Davis or John Garrett, who you got?
I got Will Davis Jr. Just talked about how I thought he's gonna have a big event. I got Will Davis.
We are tied in that one too.
All right, Clemson versus Carolina, Brandon Cobb versus Patrick Walters, and you do not have to break this down. This one's pretty self-explanatory as to who's who. Walters obviously being a Carolina Gamecock.
Why are you breaking
Uh,
it down?
I'm just telling you, so you don't have to. Matchup number three, Walters Cobb. Who you got?
Walters.
I got Walters as well. I think that one's a very tough one, very much a toss-up. Herring Masters, two guys that we talked about a lot throughout the Rapala portion. Paul Marks versus Emil Wagner, two of the absolute best on Lake Lanier. Which one you got?
I got Paul Marks.
I got Emil Wagner. So
I'm
we're
sorry,
we're
Emil.
we're
Please
def
let me stay at your house in future years.
we're
So
differing on that one. Matchup number five, previous two elite champs, Kyle Welcher and Brandon Polnick.
here's one for you. Kyle Welcher.
I got Kyle Welcher as well. Um, Again, a very tough one. You hate even picking some of these because you could easily see it going either way. Matchup number six, roommate Rumble, Jay Securit, Alex Redwine.
Shakir it.
Love it. Matchup number seven,
Whoa, whoa,
sophomore.
whoa. What did you say?
Also Jay.
Oh, okay. You just were like silent for a second. I don't know if you froze or if you just didn't say it, but I was like, wait, wait, wait. Okay.
I was collecting my thoughts.
I think we've
Uh,
we've matched up on every single one of them, right? Except for you have a meal.
Correct.
Okay.
And matchup number seven, the final matchup, sophomore standoff. Got Tyler Williams and Kyle Patrick. What you say?
I got Tyler Williams.
I got Kyle Patrick. So those
Okay.
are going to be our two
I
differences.
clicked Kyle Patrick and then went to Tyler Williams. They
Well,
love a jig. They love them a jig at Hartwell.
see, that's what's going to be the difference. I'm going to get those two right. You're going to get those two wrong. I'm going to be up by one after this tournament, and I'll be on top of all three games. But again, seven really interesting matchups. Should be a lot of fun there with the TH Marine Bassmaster Pick'em Challenge. Ronnie, let's move over to Falcon Bassmaster Drain the Lake Challenge. And if we're flexing a little bit, I'll flex just a minute. I got
Flex.
I'm at 98.6%. Had Kyle Welcher this last tournament, had a really good roster even outside of Kyle Welcher. Gave me a big boost, which I was a big fan of, and feeling very, very, very confident with my lineup heading into Lake Hartwell. So I hate to get cocky, but I think we're in really good shape with Drain the Lake. Typically, how we do this is we list off 4 and 4, and then we'll go back over the entire roster. Ronnie, I'll
I'll
let
say,
you kick us
well, I'll say
off.
this. I was just looking at it. I would be 130 more points than I'm at. I got screwed. Okay. So I'm at 83.7%. I would be much higher. What 120 points minimum would do for me is probably monumental. But losing someone who gets 40th at the St. Johns River because Matt Herron's DQ, that's just, I mean, last year it killed me when I had Trey McKinney at Smith and he gets DQ'd for a day and finishes 90 something, and I lose all those points, he would have been top five. And then this year, I picked Matt Herron at the St. John's. He gets DQ'd, and instead of 40th, he gets last, and I get minimum points instead of 150 points, I get 60 or something. So, or whatever it is, 100.
That's the Nico Harrison viewpoint is you're just not going to take accountability for not seeing the worst case scenario.
I just you try to pick them. You think you know people,
No, you're
but
right. That is a very tough
it's just
tough break
unfortunate. Like you
for the
can't. It's
fantasy team.
different than like the Scott Martin DQ where it's before the tournament. You swap them out, and it's unfortunate you can't use them. But this one, it's like it happened after, so I just got screwed. But I would be higher percentage wise. So getting a goose egg basically for one sucks. But it's all right. Far worse people in that scenario with the way it played out than me. But whatever. Um,
Your fantasy team was not. Yeah,
83.7%. I got a FaceTime coming in from my wife real quick. Hold on, I gotta hang this up. Hold on. Did that mess up Zoom?
no, we're still rolling.
We're still rolling. Okay, cool.
This is raw as it gets, folks.
Well, my computer was flashing. I see myself in four different screens here because of my phone and like, all that. So, um, I've got for the ones that I've talked about already that don't need explanation, I got Paul Marks, Tucker Smith, Brandon Cobb, and I have KJ Queen for my first four.
Okay, my first four are going to be Brandon Cobb, Easton Fothergill, Shane LaHue, and Emil Wagner. Your last four.
I have Easton Fothergill, Brandon Lester, Bob Downey, and Trey McKinney.
And to round off my team, I've got Tucker Smith, Patrick Walters, Bryant Smith, and Paul Marks.
So
Again,
I think we
very
match up like
rookie.
at least half of them, right?
Yeah, very rookie heavy for me. I've got four of them in my lineup, so half my lineup being rookies. A couple guys that are favorites, of course, with Brandon Cobb and Patrick Walters. Bryant Smith is on a roll this year. I think he's going to have another good event. Um, could easily see him having a big, big event here. And then Shane LaHue, another crossover pick for my Rapala team. So feeling good about it. And I think after this week, if all goes right, I should be 99th percentile. I don't know.
I think I mentioned KJ Queen a little bit chalk wise, but he's a Lake Norman guy. Um, they're spawning at Norman, and he is pretty good at finding them. His dad
Very,
is
very good bass fisherman.
top tier. If you know the name Jeff Queen around Norman, you either met him at a gas station or you know he's one of the best side fishermen on the lake. So KJ, the spawn of Jeff, obviously has picked up um, that trait as well. So um, I've got KJ Queen. I expect him to do less herring spawn stuff, more sight fishing stuff. Keep that flow going. I think Bob Downey is pretty good at that. He said that it was his first time at Hartwell, but I did not flinch, Kyle. I did not flinch and take him off the team. I stuck with it at the beginning of the year. I just feel like he's a decent spawn time of year fisherman. So this was the last spawn time of year fisherman fishing event that we have. We
Who did you
mentioned
say that was?
Bob Downey.
Downey. Gotcha.
Um, I picked him for the Florida swing last year for the St. John's. He has a good track record there, but it was April. He did well, top 15 there. So I mentioned KJ, mentioned Bob Downey. We talked about Cobb, Tucker Smith, Paul Marks, and Easton Fothergill before. Brandon Lester, I'm probably a week late and a dollar short there, but Lester, fantastic. Wouldn't be shocked if he pulled off his second Elite Series victory here this week at Hartwell. And I got Trey McKinney. When it comes to he did well at Murray last year. Electronics wise, I think that he's just going to be he's fishing good, and I think that he is going to do just fine this week as well. So that's my 8 for Drain the Lake. What's your winning weight thoughts this week? Because
Yeah,
that is
so
used as a tiebreaker for fantasy fishing and other games as well.
so if if winning weight, if I was being held to my winning weight at Pasquotank, I would only be off by 40 pounds. I mean, almost 40 pounds.
I was only off by like 35.
I mean, holy cow. I don't remember what I had, but it was like somewhere, I was like right at 20 pounds a day, maybe a little over, and could not have been any more wrong there. So I'm definitely probably going to be low here again. When you look at Brandon Cobb's win, I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was 72 and change.
I think it was 15, 72-15 or something like that.
Yeah. So, I went a little higher than that. I got 76.2. I don't think it's going to take 20 a day. It certainly could, and I wouldn't be shocked. But as you know, I typically bet a little under just because I don't want to, I would rather see it be high for viewing sake than, shoot too high. So I'm going 76.2.
I've got 78-13. 78-13. Same train of thought. Hartwell's just fishing so good right now. Um, Over 20 to win tournaments, 16 to 18 to get checks. I think we're right there for a winning weight, especially during the tricky. I had fish marked in this pocket. They must have finished spawning type of tournament where I got to change gears. But you can catch them quick in a hurry at Hartwell. You can go from, man, my plan A, B, C is not working, but D and E is going to bail me out. This is a lake that can do that. So, but yeah, I would expect cameras wise. I'm waiting on one individual to text us back, but not going to throw them under the bus. But it's been 24 hours. I need you to text me back or email me. But to choose the cameras, I think Will Davis. I think you can expect Brandon Cobb. You can expect a Patrick Walters. I could see a little veteran flavor, but honestly, you can't go wrong if we had a Meal, Paul Marks, Tucker Smith. If we did that, like you wouldn't go wrong there. We could definitely learn some things about this body of water. So we'll keep it on it. We might have a Kyle Welcher, Jason Christie sighting. Who knows on day one? But that's it. Stop number 4, the Bassmaster Elite Series, Whataburger Bassmaster Elite.com, Roku, FS1 on the weekends. That's where we are. Um, if you don't know or don't have Roku, well, if we're ever on Roku, we're on .com. So it's status quo. When we're on FS1, we're on FS1. So we will see you live all week. It's going to be a great event, Kyle. I love Lake Hartwell. Not my home lake. Fish is like my home lake at times, but Hartwell is a top 5 lake. I think we need to do an episode ranking some of our favorite lakes, but I think everyone loves their home lake. But non-home lakes, Hartwell and Pickwick, they're in my top 5, absolutely. So I'm excited to watch an elite event go down on a lake that I love and know pretty well, and especially when a lot of the field knows it pretty good too. It's going to be a shootout. All the secrets got to come out.
Should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's going to be a great event.
Awesome. See you, Kyle.